All right, it should eventually turn on. I'm hoping. There we go. So, hi, this is David Perlman with Microsoft, and Steve Lane is co-hosting this week. We have the pleasure of having Dr. KIngma from Syracuse University discussing remote learning. So it's all yours. If you do not want to be recorded on April 16th, please do not say anything, and we'll go forward from there, and the floor is yours.
Dave, thanks. And thanks to Microsoft for making the thing that we did at Syracuse University so meaningful for the students. And I'll give everybody the punchline right away, and then tell you sort of what we did, which is interesting. What ended up happening is students participating in this case really got into it, gave the best case presentations of the semester by looking at a case on pandemic and online learning, really got a little bit of therapy in this difficult time, and made recommendations to the Dean and the Chancellor at Syracuse University that now are getting implemented at SU. So it worked out extremely well. So let me give you a little bit about what we did. Now, I do want to admit, Dave, that I don't see the chat at all, and I've been feverishly trying to figure out where it is. Cannot pick it up. So if you see any questions that I should be answering, if you wouldn't mind telling me those questions, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. There was a link that went out in the agenda for anybody that hasn't seen it that says channel chat if you can't get in, and there's the aka.ms office hours chat. So keep going. Don't worry about it. We got the questions.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. So I'm a professor at Syracuse University. I teach in the iSchool and the B School. Actually, I've got a joint appointment. The iSchool is the School of Information Studies, and we've got an undergraduate program that is, part MIS, part applied computer science. It's a undergraduate in information management and technology, and it's part data analytics. So all of that happens in our school. And I teach the capstone class where, graduating seniors end up doing 3 cases over the semester, 3 experiential cases over the semester in order to finish out their final assignment before they go off in the working world. And this semester we had 3 great cases set up. The first case that the students did when life was normal was from Amica Insurance, actually, and the implementation of technology in the insurance industry. And the second case was from Google and an investment that Google made in a company called Dunzo out in India, and that was a brilliant case. And then the third case was coming from Microsoft when the world suddenly changed. So we were about to give them the case, and then we decided to send as everybody else, we sent all our students home to do online learning. So we developed a case that the title was Pandemic and Online Learning, and asked the students to evaluate in teams, the students in teams, and remember these are IT management students, the students in team to evaluate the various platforms that the university could be using. So they looked at MS Teams, they looked at Zoom, they looked at Blackboard, Collaborate Ultra, they looked at Google Hangouts, they were allowed to look at anything else they wanted to evaluate all those platforms, the pros and the cons. Then to one of the core values of the School of Information Studies is diversity and inclusion. So also to look at it from that perspective, the good and the bad, to give us advice on online learning and blended learning and what was working for them, the students, and what wasn't. And then also to give us recommendations for the dean and the chancellor. And as Dave started off saying earlier on, that we had 14 teams of 3 to 5 students on each team to tackle the case. The students absolutely loved it. They really got into it. And I think that in part, as I said earlier, that it became a bit of therapy for the students, that they were feeling, a little, as all the students having been sent home, a little disconnected, not their normal learning environment. We do have online programs, but at Syracuse, but only at the graduate level, and these are undergraduate students. So they're hitting this for the first time, figuring what the hell just happened to my life, going home to live with their parents, which they didn't anticipate doing, because these are graduating seniors, some of which are going to be starting jobs at Microsoft, as well as other organizations in the tech world, trying to figure out what's going on. And it gave them the opportunity. I see it as was sort of student therapy. It gave them the opportunity, a little bit of therapy, to to participate in the university, to give us solid recommendations about what we should and shouldn't do. Those recommendations turned out to be very strong, very worthwhile for the university. And as I said before, ended up being the best case presentations of the semester. The student teams made better presentations than they did for the Amica case, than they did for the Google case. They really worked into it and gave phenomenal presentations. Dave, I hope you feel that way too. I don't. So I hope you enjoyed those presentations. And then the team from Microsoft, boy, did they did yeoman's work of. I think there were 5 individuals from Microsoft that ended up spending 5 or 6 hours, probably about 5.5 hours, watching these student team presentations over MS Teams at the end. So they made a lot of recommendations. I'll give you the big 3 that the number 1 recommendation that 90% of the teams came up with was the students want more contact, more interaction with the dean and with the chancellor. That both were sending out these email announcements. This is what's going on, and as you might imagine, somewhat factual announcements. This is when we hope to reopen, when we hope to have students back on campus, et cetera, et cetera. This is what's going on with your reimbursement for your room and board at the end of the semester. But they wanted actual sort of visual connection, right? They wanted virtual connection with the dean and with the chancellor. And in fact, one team said, I'd like to hear from the dean at least twice a week, have an open session with students, which he is now doing in order to recognize that the students sort of still want that connection. We make a big deal about culture at the university, and a huge deal about culture within the School of Information Studies, within the iSchool. And students wanted to maintain that cultural feel, that family feel, and they weren't getting it through email. They wanted to do it through virtual meetings. So we've already sort of moved in that direction. It was a great recommendation by these students. The second recommendation that a lot of the student teams came up with, I'd say about 70% of the student teams, was making certain that there were individuals on campus that could work with them on the challenges they were facing, particularly for the students that weren't graduating. They were thinking about, a couple of the teams sent out surveys to all the students, and there were issues of financial aid and, internet access and quite frankly, mental health too. And they wanted the university to reach out with some of those resources to make certain that they could get help if they needed to. And we're implementing that at the university also. And then the third recommendation that most of the teams came up with was an expression of need for training for many of the faculty. Now, the faculty within the iSchool are very adept at online platforms, but you can imagine, you take history professors and English professors and, economics professors and chemistry professors that have never taught online in their life. And then all of a sudden you dump them into this, now you have to teach online. And what was happening at the university too, and unfortunately is still happening, is that many of the faculty were choosing their favorite, what they thought they could use the best. Some of them were picking Teams, some Zoom, some Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, some were doing other things. And some of those faculty were really not adept at the technology, and the students were being forced to, interact on 4 platforms, which they didn't appreciate. So they asked that more of the faculty, particularly the faculty that aren't, nimble at technology or online education, and why would they be? They've never done it before for some of them, be given some training, some additional training, so that things went more smoothly. There are a ton of other recommendations, but those were actually the 3 that most of the student teams put forward as we like to see this happening. the students felt great about it. They felt as though, they were making a difference. And, in these difficult times, everybody wants to contribute to the greater good. And the students felt that they were contributing to the greater good for the university to help us out, to help us do this better. That's an overview of everything. That's all I was going to say about the topic, unless, Dave, you wanted me to talk more about it. And I don't know if there are questions as to what we did. You're going to have to read them for me, though, because I don't see it.
No worries. So you touched a little bit on it in terms of the impact on the university, but there were a lot of things that came out in terms of let's talk about just some of the features. What were the features that were, as you looked across those same solutions, right? What were the ones that stood out, right? Love to spend a little bit of time around accessibility. Love you to spend a little bit of time around. So there were things that probably were echoed in some of my comments earlier, Bruce, where we had the number of video pane, some of those kind of things. So can you touch on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, so in looking at all the various platforms, all the students were looking for something sort of ease of use. But I do want to say that these are IT management students. So compared to the regular student, they're more comfortable in this environment than, I would say, 95% of the students on campus. They did look at accessibility to make certain that everybody could get on it easily, that regardless of one's disability, that they could use it and it would work well for them. They also looked at the number of panes. They'd like to see everybody, the control of the faculty member. Very concerned that it was easy use for the faculty member, as they saw, like I said, some of their other faculty fumbling around with the technology for 30 minutes before they actually got it working. There are a number of students that are on lower speed lines and felt that some of the platforms, didn't stream as well as other platforms. I'm trying to think of the other recommendations, the other pros and cons. I don't know.
I have a bunch of them. I remember.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you remember from those? Because Dave, you did a great job of judging. So
it was really interesting, right? So here's a bunch of, obviously intelligent kids from a fairly diverse background, right? There were folks that were from overseas, and again, I'm just guessing by accents that I heard, or English probably was not their first language. So when we looked at a number of things, right? So these are folks that are going out and maybe working at Microsoft or maybe at one of the institutions of people that are on the call. So while they say that, hey, they like to feel that connection, right? Very few of the students turned on video. Very few of them, right? When they were looking at theirs, you did a better job at reminding them perhaps than one of the other professors, right? And so when I said, hey, why don't you turn on your video, right? Or they would just jump in and they forgot that we're not necessarily, we're familiar with the case. I don't know what the research was that they did. So with these students, right, citing sources, right? So there were people that were, one person had this phenomenal graphic around accessibility. Like I went to the source of that particular, the one with the gears, right? And inside, outside. Yep. I don't know if you recall that.
I do.
And I actually asked the author, can I reuse this? I saw it somewhere. I thought it was great. The people actually were able, I think they did some quick research, one of the presenters, about where they found it, but out of the 14 people that presented information that were using and citing sources, there's probably only 3 teams that really, in my opinion, did a good job at citing them at the end of their, at the end of the conversation or at the end of the presentation. The other thing that was really interesting, while we were all familiar with the case, how they got to that information, how they presented it, we didn't care. But very few people actually said, okay, here's my agenda, here's the premise, here's how we're going to attack it, and then here's the conclusion. So 4 maybe did a really, and again, just my opinion, did a really good job at that. And as educators, right, or as people that are decision makers around IT, like we really need to communicate, right, with our classes or with our teammates or with our peers. Hey, it's not just this opportunity that it's one directional, right? This is a class, we're getting feedback. And we want to know, okay, what are you going to talk about? How are you going to talk about? And let us see your face, right? So, so that was interesting. A couple of times, the other thing was there were audio challenges sometimes, right? And then we also had this chat thing going on, like here. There are times when I'm the only person doing this because every now and then Steve's like out golfing all the time or on Cuba Lake. I don't know what they do down in Ithaca. He has a lot more time off, not really, than I do, but with Preston going on, I'm trying to manage the chat pane and some other things so that people really weren't interacting with some of the questions we had sometimes. So, Dr. KIngma, you did a great job at kind of reminding people, hey, there's stuff in the chat pane, right? Go take a look because Knucklehead Perlman's asking relevant questions you might want to answer because it'll impact your grade. Like, so you were supposed to talk about accessibility and you didn't. I want to come back to that. So that to me was really interesting. Bruce, we're going to have an internal meeting about stuff that relates, so Microsoft meeting around specific feature functionality across the various platforms. And I asked Bruce not to really get into that, but like, you know, if there were a couple things, just as you as an instructor, you watched 6 hours of this, right? At least that we were participant of, what were some of the things that were important to you as an instructor?
Well, you mentioned some of the things, but I think one of the things that I really learned, which I'm going to be implementing in future classes, it's one thing to ask students to stand in front of a classroom and give a face-to-face presentation with a big screen behind them, and a completely different thing for them to have a virtual presentation, right? And I've never taught the students that skill, that second skill, right? I've always taught them, okay, this is how you stand in front of a room with this huge monitor behind you and people live in front of you. But it's a different way of presenting when you're presenting on the computer. And it's such an important skill. So this is entirely my fault for not sort of teaching them this earlier on. It's such an important skill that actually for our business communications class in the fall, we're going to be implementing a couple of weeks of just virtual presentations, right? This is a class that happens way earlier than the capstone. And like any one of these classes, you know, we teach them to give a TED talk. We teach them, to do emails correctly and to communicate that way correctly. We teach them other communication skills, but we've never taught them virtual team communication skills and virtual presentations. And the one thing this showed me was we need to be teaching that. They're going to be on virtual teams, and I should have been teaching it to them 2-3 years ago, but we will be teaching them starting this fall how to make effective virtual presentations to a virtual team and participating in all this.
No, that's wonderful. So then, like, if you're going to give that education to the students, how do we, as IT leaders within our education institutions, whether it be K through 12 or higher ed, you know, how do we teach that superintendent? How do we teach that faculty staff member? Oh, you know, Dr. KIngma, he's been doing it the same way, and he talks like this, and he's not really engaging, and, you know, he's not aware that, you know, this is what his background looks like. You know, how are you going to educate the faculty and staff across a couple thousand folks at Syracuse University?
Yeah, so that's that's a big question and an extreme need. And you know, part of it is how are our lives going to be changed post-pandemic, right? Post-COVID, yep. What's going to happen? Because I have a lot of faculty at Syracuse University that you know were dragged into online learning or online teaching only because of COVID, right?
Yep.
They have never thought about this for their entire career. They were not interested in doing online teaching, and all of a sudden the world changed, and we forced them to do this, right? And it's extremely important to give them those skills if post-COVID that we're going to still be asking them to teach online. Now, I have to say this, that you know I'm a big believer in blended education. So even if you know the world returns to what it was starting in the fall of 2020. You know, we can all speculate as to whether that's a good or bad guess, but even if it does return, I think it's still worthwhile for even those faculty to understand that their students are living in a world in which they're going to be participating in virtual meetings. They're going to be having colleagues, you know, in the workplace that are virtual, and it's important for them, regardless of the subject, to have some exposure to blended education and to recognize how technology can be leveraged to make even the classroom experience that much better for those faculty members. So, and if we don't return to normal, those faculty are still going to be forced to go down this path again. We really need to get them trained as quickly as possible.
So I'll make a statement, then I have a question, then I have an ask, right? Which is, I always enjoy talking anyway. So first, how am I doing in my presentation skills as a professor? Am I keeping this interesting and moving along, and are we setting the right tone?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think so. I mean, you guys are having a great time.
awesome.
Before I started talking, I thought, what a fun group, and there's not even alcohol.
Not yet. There will be if I have to hear my son practicing trumpet for another hour outside my office door. Oh my gosh, it's really, what hair I had left is going. So the other, kind of more of of a statement, right? Which is there have been schools that have been very ingrained in online learning for a while, right? And so some of them are up in New Hampshire. There's a couple of other large programs that are out there,
Yeah.
right? And the barrier to entry, so it's going to change what we're all doing, right? What are kids willing to pay for? What does that hybrid mix look like? So I think we're going to find much more of that mix. And so as you go out so the question is, as you go out and start thinking about how are you going to train your faculty and staff at Syracuse University, you have 20 some odd thousand students and 3,000 or 4,000 faculty staff members. It's a lot, right? So like one of the earliest adopters at Syracuse was actually your sports marketing organization, right? Andy, who's the the chief marketing officer, and he's, I'm tired of getting emails, Dave. Can you help us? And I'm like, sure, right? A lot of this is outside of IT, right? And there's other things that we're working on. When you start conducting that training, is it going to be through academic computing? Is it going to be through professional development? And then, so I'll let you answer that, and then I'd love to kind of understand how you're going to do that. So I'd love to have you back, or internally here, or externally with the Microsoft team. So take either one of those. How are you going to conduct that training?
Yeah, so across the university, I don't know, right? I mean, that's I'm a lowly faculty member in two schools, and the university will certainly make some decision. It will probably come through ITS, our IT services group, that will play a heavy role in it. That's the group that has to implement all of these platforms anyhow. But that's just speculation on my part. Within the iSchool, we actually have a professional that works with faculty to increase the quality of their classes, let's say, help them with the pedagogy, whether it's face-to-face or online. We've been doing online education for a very long time at the graduate level. So we actually, back in 1993, were one of the first to offer, back in 1993, we were one of the first to offer master's degree online, way back in the dark ages of the internet. So we've been doing it at the graduate level for a very long time. So it was a lot easier for the faculty within the School of Information Studies, although we've never done it for the undergraduates online education. It was still easier for those faculty that teach undergraduates like myself to turn on a dime and to be comfortable in the online environment. So.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to hear even what your one faculty member is doing at the iSchool, right? And obviously, I talked to your CIO and a bunch of the other, your deans and your chancellor. Every once in a while, I get invited to a football game. But love to hear what you're doing within the iSchool. So I'd love to come back. Lastly, then we have a question or two. So great content. I appreciate it. As it relates to teams, right? And again, we're not on the sales side of things here, so well, maybe I'm a little bit, but Heather really is. We blame it all on Heather. As it relates to teams, what was just high level positives and negatives about teams? And I don't know if you have that handy because I asked you not really to focus on that, but just off the top of your head, pros or cons.
I mean, I love the team's environment. It seems it's very user friendly. It's very easy to use. So our learning management system is Blackboard. And actually with my business communications class, I've been using Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And with my capstone class, I've been using MS Teams as the primary way of communicating. But any students that want to have office hours with me, which has exploded, the number of students that want to talk to me every day, I use MS Teams to do. It's very user-friendly, very easy for them to handle. Whether they're on their phone or on their laptop. I have some students with very low bandwidth that live way out in the Adirondacks and very rural neighborhoods. But yes, MS Teams still works very well for them. I've got a number of faculty, quite frankly, that are, I haven't figured out how to do it, but they're really into these groups about, taking a class of 50 and sending them off into 10 groups of 5, which is the downside, I think, of Teams, that they have not been able to figure out how to do it in Teams. And and that's something more accommodating in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, which is our LMS, right? And so the students are used to the Blackboard environment, but there are some glitchy things in Collaborate Ultra, including the fact that it seems to be a real bandwidth hog, and so my students that are in rural areas tend to have more problems. There's a lot more buffering with those students.
Okay. And again, not to beat up on Blackboard, have you considered, have you guys looked at any of the Teams integration, at least in starting a meeting out of Blackboard yet, that we announced about a week or two ago? I'm not even sure if you're aware of it.
No, I'm not aware of it. I'm certain somebody at the campus is, but I'm not aware of it.
Oh, listen, that's a great ask to come from a faculty and staff member, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, to Jenny and Sam and Eric. I'll send that documentation over to you. We have, and we are using Canvas Connect. So there was a, Jose had mentioned that they have Canvas and they're actually using the Teams connector. How's it working, Jose? You can just put it in the chat panel. So I'll send that out. It's been working great. Awesome. Yes. I've heard the same thing, as long as you're on the SaaS version of Blackboard, being able to be in Blackboard, right? And especially for some of these low bandwidth areas, so they can basically click a button, right? And it'll start up a Teams session, right? In order to have that communication, dialogue, the video, and some of the other things. So I'll share that out with you, Bruce, as well. And you can, ask Jenny or somebody, see if they can help enable that. It's not terribly difficult. It's a pretty quick integration. We had a question from Marge. Have you identified, Bruce, any free resources that may help people do better online presentations? Maybe let me see what the, maybe in chunks. I'm not sure if chunks is the correct thing. So I don't know, have you identified it?
Yeah, to do small tutorials.
So I have an answer for that, but Bruce, have you found any free resources yet around any of those?
No, I haven't. I've my business communication class, I've completely transformed from 40-minute lectures with 40-minute activities in the face-to-face version to all 10-minute lectures with 10-minute activities. So I've completely modified that in the online environment. I have chunked that, but I've not identified any free resources that are worthwhile that I've seen that are good.
So I will share out with the community as well as with yourself, Bruce, and you can send it around to whoever you want at SU. As part of, I think it was a week or two ago, Steve, keep me honest, Steve Lane, there's a one of our Microsoft Innovative Educators runs a YouTube channel with probably 33-minute videos on everything on how to present, how to prepare as a faculty staff member, how to prepare as a student. So I'll send that link out specifically to you, Bruce, but I'll also put it in our Teams channel so everybody here can, and it's really well done, right? So Microsoft Innovative Educators are educators that we've certified being, I think, Heather, were you in MIE at one point? You probably can't come off because you have school.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Put the headset on this time so that there's no children in the background.
Awesome.
I was not in MIEE, but I am heavily engaged with that community now that I'm here with Microsoft, because they are some of the most amazing educators you will ever come across. So it's an awesome community with brilliant ideas.
And it's thank you, Heather. So these are people that are at the top of their game in terms of very highly rated teachers that have spent a lot of time with Microsoft getting certified. And so we can actually probably apply some of those resources to some of the folks in the community to be able to come after this problem. So I will post it in the Teams channel. She does, I don't know, a couple of these a week. Mike Folfson, who is one of our product managers, also highlighted her in one of his blogs that's out on LinkedIn and Twitter, but I'll make sure that I put that in the Teams channel so everybody has a piece to it. LinkedIn Learning helped us also, and the mechanics have been doing vids as well. So if Microsoft Mechanics is actually a website, and then there's also a group called The Garage where they do a lot. So feel free, Jose, I guess, Jose, you mentioned that, put those links in the community call channel and just title it, remote learning resources, and then I'll also add to that. So real quick, Bruce, Heather is probably going to be joining us on some of these calls as a co-host here and there, along with some others. So that there's COVID-19, aka.ms/covid19.edu. And Heather saw all the stuff that was going on, and she's like, hey, you know what? This information, we were getting inundated by customers, by internal people, all of a sudden everybody at Microsoft, 120,000 people wanted to help anybody in education and healthcare. And they were putting out all these blogs and all this stuff, and we couldn't keep track of it. So Heather actually created that sway. So if you haven't seen that, so talking about cool things, I thought that was pretty good work, Heather, for what it's worth. So I've probably referenced that a million times. So COVID19.edu. So if you want to go out and see
so just aka.ms/COVID19 edu.
edu. Sorry, let me read.
Yeah, there's just no dot near the end of the edu.
My typing skills aren't so good. 19.edu. So if you want to take a look at a lot of the resources that are out there, did you reference? Anyways, I'll put some other things in the chat pane. So Bruce, let's see. Did we have any other questions? Usually somebody texts me something.
I did have
one.
To see the Blackboard integration stuff in the Teams channel. So if you can put that in the Teams as well, I'd love to see it.
Absolutely. So basically what we did at Microsoft, and Bruce, sorry, one sec. We came out with, hey, if you're a LMS and you want to integrate with Microsoft Teams in some fashion, being able to start a Teams meeting, we provided kind of the LTI integration. Then it was up to them to really snap to that LTI integration. Blackboard, Canvas. Steve Lane, are you still on? We found out Sakai. How'd you make out on your Sakai LMS?
Here. So I haven't touched it. That's tomorrow's project.
Perfect. So out of the 6 people in the U.S. that use Sakai, Rutgers, Ithaca College, a couple other places, Steve, he's like, come on, what's going on with Sakai? What's going on with Sakai? And we actually found something. So we're excited about that. I'd love to hear your report back on that, how that goes. So Absolutely. I'll send that out. So lastly, Bruce, I had one text from one of Microsoft team members. I don't know why they can't use the channel. So as you're looking forward right into what you're going to be doing over the coming semesters, what do you see remote learning looking like for your classes? Just going forward, with the assumption that, yeah, things may turn back to normal, they may not be, but how are you going to change your basic teaching models from what you've been going through over the last couple of months?
Yeah, so as I said before, it's so important for the student to have these skills, right? And I think we learned that when your group from Microsoft made an initial presentation in the classroom and talked about the extent to which you were on a virtual team all day, every day, which is something that we have to teach our students. So I know that in terms of remote learning, virtual teams, this has to be implemented in the curriculum. But like I said, both in our business communications class, which is a freshman level class, but also in our capstone class, which is the senior level class, getting them ready to go out the door. So I will certainly implement assignments that require them to participate in a virtual team so that they get used to it and get accustomed to it.
Excellent. And how are you creating work-life balance for yourself as a professor during these changing times? So I, as a remote worker at Microsoft, I literally could be working almost all day, every day, 7 days a week. And we did about a 18-day straight stretch where, just people were getting burnt out, including myself. I took off Monday and I was only on 3 phone calls that day. What is it doing to your work-life balance as a professor?
It's interesting because when I had face-to-face office hours, I would have maybe 1 student a month show up to those office hours. I'm getting 4, 5, 6 students a day contacting me.
Wow.
And meeting with me through MS Teams. It's just exploded, the number of students that actually want to. Now, part of that is, they want a touch point with the university. They see me as approachable, and so they want to make certain they connect with me. So the amount I'm online and the amount I'm working actually has increased. But I've got this wonderful German Shepherd that keeps me grounded, as well as a wonderful wife too that keeps me grounded. And so my work life happens when my German Shepherd comes up and starts pounding on me to take him outside to play, okay. which is my diversion on a daily basis, actually almost on an hourly basis.
So let me be more direct. Are you working more or less?
I am working more. I am working more. There's no question about it. So going to online education, I have been working more. But I think it's, part of it is the online education, going to that. Part of it is I've got well over 100 students that are a little nervous, right? Okay. And, are looking for jobs and and are looking for internships and not quite certain, and they want somebody to talk to. So
Excellent.
although I'm not trained in it, you know, I'm a little bit of their therapist too. So
You've already helped me through my day, Bruce. So, so on that note, thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you again, I think maybe in the fall, and I'd love to kind of see where this conversation has gone. I'll have a follow-up with you on some of the other things we discussed about, but really appreciate your time. I am going to stop the recording at this point. For those of you, give me one sec here. So again, thank you, everybody. This was, you know, really